I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 16, so let's focus on verses 2 and 3. The entire Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the Israelites said to them, "If we had only died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat, and we ate all the bread that we wanted. And instead, you brought us into this desert to make this whole assembly die of hunger." We generally think of slave life as a constant stream of whipping and starvation. But in actuality, the Library of Congress has compiled first-hand accounts by American Civil War era slaves who describe a very different way of life. To be sure, listen, I'm not advocating slavery or seeking to absolve slave owners of their moral injustices. I'm simply relaying the testimonies of those people who lived the life of slaves in the United States. It helps to understand that slaves were forced laborers. But no slave owner who is concerned about making a profit would deprive or abuse his property to the point that it reduced productivity. So therefore, a slave owner would clothe his slaves. I'm not saying they went to the department store and had nice clothes, but they clothed them, they housed them, they fed them. None of it was luxurious by any means, but the basics would be there. And not only is slavery a high moral crime, it's also bad business. It has been proven that free workers are far more efficient than slave labor. And yet the myth of slavery, which would be free labor, will always entice people throughout the generations. And part of what makes slavery inefficient for the master is how enslavement affects a person's spirit. You see, slaves then become crafty. How so? Well, they become quite adept at working just hard enough to avoid the whip. Take away a man's freedom, and he loses his self-worth. Therefore, he loses his initiative and his discipline. So, biblical slavery, as God allows for the community of Israel in the Bible, is the free-willed, indentured type of slavery, not forced slavery like we saw in the slave era of the United States. So while the New Testament refers to believers as slaves, it also calls followers of Jesus disciples. And we're also described as co-inheritors with the Messiah. We have rights and privileges that are not bestowed upon slaves. So the simple meaning of a disciple is a person who disciplines themselves to follow. And this is exactly why God led Israel through the desert for so long. He was weaning Israel from a slave life that they had in Egypt, a slave mentality, slave ethics, and etc. And he was teaching them how to be disciplined and freely devoted to him. Now, while still a youth, the nation of Israel is led through difficult circumstances. They're going through desert after desert. And their responses to adversity exposed their craftiness, their unrighteousness, and their spiritual immaturity. Now, what difficult circumstances has God led you through lately? Have you disciplined your walk so as to condition a response that honors the name that He has given to you, that you are redeemed? Or do you still long for the dysfunctional comfort, the slow, certain death of sin's bondage in whatever Egypt that you were delivered from? Believe me, you can't go back and think about what life was like in bondage and somehow glorify it. It was killing you. So let's move forward in the hope of God's Word. And if you don't know that, well, that's why we're here at Groundworks Ministries, to lead you day by day and chapter by chapter so that you understand the Bible, that you can live according to it, and so that you can share that hope with others who are in the slavery of this world. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Check us out at groundworksministries.com.